Wonderful. That is excellent. And so tonight, I'll be facilitating this curated discussion. Most of you know me, Dr. Carol Penn, excited to be here this evening as we're all recovering from Super Bowl and the Olympics and all of those things of the last 2 weeks. And it's good to continue the discussion. And tonight, I believe, hopefully most of us have had the opportunity to take a look at the video from the National Town Hall on Reparations, which took place in Evanston, Illinois on the 10th of December. And we're going to be discussing some highlighted points from that experience. And just to let you know, I am in shared space. And if you hear anything in the background, that is my roommate and dear friend and colleague. She's participating in revisioning medicine, and I am here with all of you. So shall we take a moment just to breathe together, and then I'm going to share a poem that was actually shared at the National Town Hall on Reparations to put us in that space to get the conversation going. It's like everyone just to take a nice deep cleansing breath or two. Please feel free to close your eyes or leave them open, whatever feels comfortable and supportive to you in this moment. Allowing oneself to come into a place of awareness, this moment, right now. This breath right now, it's a breath that you've never ever taken before, in a moment you've never ever experienced before, with people you might have seen before, but you've never been with each other. We've never been with each other in this moment, in this time of history, and in this discussion. We take a moment to remember and acknowledge the legacy upon which our lives are built, the individual, the collective. We take a moment to make meaning from the interpersonal connections that we have with each other and with this subject matter. We take a moment to understand the ground upon which we stand or sit is made sacredness by the holiness of this moment. The history that we are making, the stories that we are telling, and we welcome all opinions, even when they are difficult or different from our own. And most of all, we are grateful for the opportunity to share, to have the discussion. And I will continue just sharing this poem from County Cullen, one of the preeminent artists of the Harlem Renaissance. This beautiful poem, Yet Do I Marvel. I doubt not God is good, well-meaning, kind. And did he stoop to quibble, could tell why the little buried mole continues blind. Why flesh that mirrors him must someday die. Make plain the reason tortured Tantalus is baited by the fickle fruit. Declare if merely brute caprice doomed Sisyphus to struggle up a never-ending stair. Inscrutable his ways are, and immune to catechism by a mind too strewn with petty cares to slightly understand What awful brain compels his awful hand? Yet do I marvel at this curious thing, to make a poet black and bid him sing. So that's one of my son's favorite poems. So, and happy birthday, Keita Omowale. Today it is his birthday, and I'm celebrating becoming a mama today, 27 years ago. So let us jump into the conversation. So I have a question, and I'm very curious about people's opinion regarding this. So this national town hall that was convened on reparations, these were funds from the sale of cannabis, and they're funding reparations to those afflicted by housing discrimination. So when you consider, the history of cannabis, the source of the funds, how does that sit with people? There's some discussion about bringing in the sale of cannabis, and they're looking. One of the places being considered for the sale of cannabis is Red Bank. Eatontown is another place where it's being looked. Does the end justify the means in this case? Who has some thoughts about that? And where should this cannabis be sold? Is it Red Bank? Is it Eatontown? Why not Rumston or Little Silver? Or Shrewsbury, for that matter.
Who's proposing selling it? I'm sort of behind the issue. Who's proposing selling it?
Well, I don't know if anyone has, the exact names and organizations, but this is this is huge right now with, each state adapting rules about the legality of cannabis and the sale, and in what communities it's going to be sold in. And so there's a big, argument. Of course, there's the medicinal use of cannabis, and there's the that's one of the big arguments, that it does have some pretty amazing efficacy, actually, in terms of pain reduction and its efficacy in any number of chronic illnesses. And then there's also, though, but where are these shops going to be? And those that are in that world, one of the two areas there are actually three areas that are being looked at here: Red Bank, Eatontown, and Neptune, if my memory serves me correctly. And then, and another argument, okay, it's going to create jobs, but then it's also, there's bidding wars going on as to who actually will get the licenses to sell the cannabis. And of course, those people who hold the licenses will also benefit, have the most profit from it.
I don't really know very much about what's happening in the world of cannabis just being legalized in New Jersey, but one of the things that I recall hearing in the workshop was the importance of education. And we really are in the dark ages about education. We have something new like the sale of cannabis in New Jersey, and I don't think many people know anything about it at this point, very little anyway. And as it's related to the effort to use the taxation on that for reparations, I have literally heard nothing until I heard the workshop and what was done in Evanston. That was the first I've heard of it. So we have a lot to do in terms of helping people understand the big picture of what's going on, and then how something like the sale of cannabis might be a part of working on the end goal of reparations.
Well,
I think,
thank
if you get into, a lot of people disapprove of that. It was approved by the voters to legalize cannabis. And probably in any given room, you're going to find people who are still opposed to it and don't think it should have been legalized. I want to recognize Arsheen Woodard, a friend of mine from Chubb, and we still keep in touch. She's one of our HR managers who was a great leader in our company. And Arsheen, I'm glad you made it online today with us tonight.
Thank you.
We don't see you, but I
Wow.
hope you can hear us.
You don't want to see me, trust me.
Well, welcome, Arsheen. Glad you were able to join us this evening. So yeah, because that's going to be a question as we go forward. How are these things paid for, right? And who is benefiting? So there's the the context in which these discussions are being held, and how the discussions themselves are even being financed and what's happening around it. So that's one thing. And I thought it was interesting that it was funds from the sale of cannabis, which are being used in Evanston in the state of Illinois, as part of funding reparations to those afflicted by housing discrimination. The other thing, there were so many things that I got from watching this town hall, but I also wanted to ask the gathered community to share your thoughts on HR 40, which is the current bill that's being touted as the best prospect for reparations since Reconstruction. And we need something like, in order for it to get passed in Congress, we needed to have something like 218 votes, right? And it had gotten up to possibly 213, needing that 5 more before it could, be passed on to executive orders. So how are people feeling about HR 40 and where things stand? And again, I ask, and kind of like, and why not? Why is it so difficult to get those 5 more votes?
I see that Donna Corman has her hand up.
I'll just
Oh, yes, please.
very quickly, it's infuriating. Just absolutely infuriating. It's only a bill to establish a commission. It's outrageous after decades. And that, number one. And the thing is I view HR 40 as being super positive, super important, because the more ways I look at this, and God knows after watching that town hall, there's a lot of ways of looking at it. The more ways I look at it, it is the responsibility of the federal government. The faults were by our federal government, and the federal government is going to have to be the one to make it right.
Thank you, Donna. Teretha, I see your hand is up.
Good evening, everyone. I have 3 points. Going back first to the Illinois law with making cannabis legal, and then other places that are hitting that. I have problems with that. Number one, it's still illegal on the federal level. Federal law supersedes state law. So what is happening now, law enforcement is in a quandary because they have to uphold the laws. Federal versus the local legal issues. So that number one, I think people are forgetting. Everybody's, oh yeah, it's illegal. No, it's not, because if a DEA agent or FBI stops you, you're jammed up. Number two, I have a problem with it being legalized state or federal, because if you're going to do that, then release everybody black and brown that's incarcerated for unnecessary crazy terms for possession, sale, distribution, or even use of cannabis, period. And until that's done, it's a travesty. Then number 3, with HR 40, everybody needs to recognize and understand we're still dealing with blatant, vagrant racism, systemic and individual on all levels, that people are not willing and able to address. Hence, this is why HR 40, which is only to form a commission to study, is still a problem. So people have to look within themselves and search themselves and get over their madness. So those are my 3 points on that. It's just pure foolishness. And it's the same as, what can I use as a comparable? The school integration. It's all good until it was a problem with people looking like me. I'm a Native woman in America, moving next door, so our kids are going to school together. So now, see, this is the same thing. And I think sometimes people don't have to live the experience, they kind of miss those little intricate points. So that's my 2 cents worth. And yes, I see the comment here from Donna about cannabis being illegal. Yes, it is illegal. And I could lose my license to practice nursing if I'm dealing with anybody with it. It could be a major kind of quandary of a mess. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Yeah, thank you very much for those comments and pointing that out. There is the irony, is it not, that now that, you know, when you look at the passage of legalization on the state level, and then again, who is going to benefit from it? And yet we have people incarcerated who live in Black or brown bodies for possession. And, you know, where is the reparations, or where's the making whole again of people who are sitting in prison for what looks like, you know, because I'm, you know, like how many minority business owners are applying for these licenses, how many people living within marginalized or minoritized communities are actually going to benefit economically from the legalization of marijuana. So again, it's, you know, it's that duality, it's that, and this is what we're being called upon to consider and to think about as we consider and reflect and think about reparations as a whole, and how do we bring that about? How is it that we make whole what has been torn asunder? How is it that we solve this problem, or is it fundamentally unsolvable?
I'm
I
not
don't
sure
know.
about other states, but I'm pretty sure in New Jersey, part of the so-called legalization, because Taritha's correct, it certainly isn't legal federally. Part of the passage of that law included expunging and records of anyone who had been convicted and jailed for marijuana, and also releasing from prison anyone who was in because of that drug offense. I know Cory Booker was working to make that a part of the law, and I can't remember all the details because there were a lot of little pieces of the law that I'm not, again, it goes back to education. We really don't have all of the necessary knowledge about, you know, how this is being handled. I guess
Yes.
going back to HR 40, which was your initial question, one of my concerns is obviously Pelosi and her 2 whips are concerned about the effect of passing HR 40 implicating people as, well, nobody's going to get reelected if you vote for that. And the majority in the House and the Senate is definitely at risk in the 22 elections. So what I heard them say is it's difficult for them to get it passed because there are people withholding support because of voting on it will cause a lot of the swing voters not to support the Democrats. And that's a big issue, because if we lose the House and the Senate, nothing ever will get done in the next 3 years. So I certainly think it's a very benign law, basically just funds examining the issue and how to go about it and giving the funding to make sure there's a commission to study it. And then also I think it includes making criminal any kind of refusal to participate in the subpoena process or something like that.
And yet, what is the cost of not passing it? Who pays that price, Irene?
Well, I don't see it as not passing it ever. What I see is that people are expecting the Biden administration to do everything this first year. And I guess it is important if we lose the House and the Senate, something has to be done. But I also fear greatly losing the swing voters, because we haven't educated people. They hear the word reparation and it becomes some kind of a stigma. And just like when you hear defund the police or critical race theory, it turns a lot of voters away. And as much as we would approve of those things or see the validity to them, how do we maintain control of the House and the Senate when we have to rely on people who are not as savvy and aware and caring about these issues as we might be, or people who are more progressive thinkers? So there are two hands up. So
yes,
I
thank you,
yield the floor.
Irene. So Terry, and then Dr. Teresa.
Hello, everybody. Apropos of nothing, the gal who cuts my hair for 30 years was over to the house yesterday doing it. And we started talking about, the ways that I've been keeping myself busy in this protracted time at home. And I talked to her about UUCMC, and I talked to her about reparations. And she said, "What are reparations? I don't know what that word means." And the reason I'm bringing this up is that she is, I think, kind of a every person. She's got a community college education, a civil service job. She's nearly 60 or 55. I'm way past that. I don't count it anymore. My point is that if someone could direct me, because I was so caught off guard that I was like, on the one hand, this is a wonderful opportunity. And on the other hand, I hope to God I don't screw it up. I would really love to know what to say that is not going to make her say, "That's it, I stopped listening now. You said the wrong word." So I don't know if that's anything that this group has visited, or if you have any resources you can recommend. But I would love to know, when that opportunity presents itself again, what I should do. Thanks.
Yeah, that's wonderful. We will open up the floor for discussion. So perhaps people can share and contribute with that. So thank you for the question very much. So let's go over to Teresa, and then we'll let people chew on that for a while, and we'll come back to that.
Yes, Donna, no, it was Irene, said that it was a benign issue. It's not benign. Black people are the ones that would pay the cost regarding the issues. And the people are worried and don't want to put a vote out because they're afraid of this, because we have to deal with the facts. The fact is racism is well and alive. And there are more people that would rather sit quietly and not call it out or address it and deal with it. They don't want to do that. They'll sit there with their heads down, play on their phones and ignore it. They'll do it at home. They'll do it on the job. They'll do it in the schools. They'll do it in the legislative house and anywhere else. So until that issue is addressed and people don't want to be uncomfortable, well, I, as a Black woman, don't give a hoot. They have to be uncomfortable because my people are uncomfortable 24/7, 365, and a leap year 366. So that's where we are. And it's not an issue for Black people to address. White people must begin to address it. That's,
I
there's no
just
other way
wanted
to
to,
put
I
it.
just wanted to say, I didn't say the issue was
No,
benign.
that's not
said
what I'm
the
saying. It's
law-
not a
the bill
benign
is
issue in
benign
any
because all it's
frame.
doing is appropriating money. The issue is not benign at all. It's just, to me, the law isn't doing anything. It's not accomplishing anything for reparations. It's simply a study.
So
So it
just the
shouldn't be
discussion of
something.
race is a problem in America.
Well,
This
that's
is why
sure.
people are able to
question
lie about
about that.
CRT, talking about their children's minds are being taken over, and it's not even taught in the schools. This is a 400-year problem. So that's what I'm saying.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's get back to Terry's question. Next time that happens and someone says, well, what is reparations? What do you say? What do you say when someone asks you that question? And this is, again, something I think that if you're living in a white body, to begin to even formulate your answers while we're together tonight, because I may get asked that question and people may have certain assumptions as to how I might answer, but a white body person might ask that of another white body person, because, they want to know, well, what is this about? And they're going to have an assumption of you living in another white body. So how do you answer that question?
Denise has her hand up.
Yes, please, Denise. Thank you.
Oh, I didn't even know I pushed the button, but I did have something to say. I'm fortunate to have a sister who should be Trump's sister. And for people who believe that they are not racist and also believe that there is no reason for reparations, I haven't yet found any way to begin to reach her. And I'm sure that there are many, many more of my sister out there for sure.
I thought maybe I could tell you what I said to kind of take the pressure off. And then we can talk about what I got wrong and if I got anything right, what I should repeat the next time. So after I was like, hamina, I said, well, what we're talking about, have you heard about income disparity? And she said, oh, yes, I've heard of that. I said, okay, so what we're talking about is that it didn't happen in a vacuum. And I didn't say this to her because I didn't learn it until later because I looked it up. But what I found is that the ratio of income disparity in this state, the 300 and some thousand to, it's a perfect 80 to 20 ratio. And that is actually a thing. There's like mottos that go with like some 80-20 rule. And I thought, so maybe that is then a visual for white people is here is $1 and 20% of it is what my Black neighbors have as a net worth. And the whole $1 is what I have as a typical white person as a net worth. That's an example of income disparity. And then I said, we didn't get here overnight. So it's going to take multiple things. It's not one thing. It's not let's give money. It's let's recalibrate and balance the system. And at that point, her eyes glazed over and she stopped listening. So what do I say next time? What do you think?
I think that was a good start.
Oh, thank you,
And
Dr. Penn. That was very gracious.
And I don't think we're going to get this right. You know, we're
Right.
all going to stumble over our words. One of the things that might have made it more relatable to her was might be to compare it to or look at the income discrepancy just for being a woman.
Right.
You know, remind her that we have uphill battles within many groups that have been marginalized, and she could perhaps relate to that as a woman and say, well, you know, that's not fair, that's not right. You know, if I'm doing the same work, I should make the same money. Well, then you can turn around and relate that to, well, in this country, that also plays out along racial lines.
Right.
So making reparations, it might not only just refer to people who live in Black bodies, but it could also then begin to spread out and include others who are marginalized, including women, including you as a woman. You have not made as much in your 60 years on this planet as a man doing similar work. Is that fair? Is that correct? Is that something that sits well with you? So I think sometimes if you can find the situation to relate it to in a person's life, they can begin to extrapolate and expand a little bit. So Denise has her hand back up, and I think Sarah also had something to say. No, Denise's hand is not up. Okay, Sarah, did you have something to say? I think some things
Yeah.
have been put in the chat as well.
Thank you. And Denise, if you want to lower the hand, you have to go back to reactions. You can, yes, but you can leave it up. Is okay. I was just going to say, I think Sheila Jackson Lee, Representative Lee, gives a very nice summary of the basic points about uncompensated labor for 250 years, longer than this country has been a country. And she talks about so she mentions income disparity and also the, I don't have to, the more recent discoveries around the genetic impact of the trauma of enslavement, which has been, a lot of people need to see the numbers on the page or what, and in fact, that's one of the points that is made in the end, about creating political will for reparations. One of the panelists says you lead with data, and but the statement from Representative Lee at the end really, she nails it. She says you don't, and there's no need to have had a direct connection to the institution of slavery. That it's the, this is what is meant by systemic racism, and this is the antidote to the systemic quality and systemic nature. I put I see Teresa put a link in for why we need reparations, and then also the link that I put in is the 10-point program, 10-point plan, which is, I think, a nod to the, I'm totally speculating, so I won't even say it, but the Black Panthers had a 10-point program, and it's a nice way to articulate the different aspects. So this is from NCOBRA, and we're hoping to have a representative from NCOBRA, the fellow who spoke at the town hall next month. It's not yet confirmed, but so the 10 points sort of articulate the different, indeed articulate the different aspects of, but I think more important is Representative Lee. Sorry, going on and on. But, and one other thing I would say, and I think this is implied throughout this town hall discussion, you know, especially by Dr. Malveaux, Julianne Malveaux, the one who's got the laptop in front of her the whole time. You know, I don't know what she's recording it or whatever. She's got her notes in front of her so she can, you know, speak more specifically on things. But the history of intense trauma through lynchings, the federal government completely failed to defend the civil rights of the people, not only the people who were actually lost their lives, but the threat. I mean, it's called terrorism for a reason. It cast a shadow on the, you know, the ability of all formerly enslaved people and their descendants to participate in this society. You know, I don't know if anybody remembers the line from, and I'll stop after this, but the line from the fellow, sorry, it's a little noisy. Can you hear me okay? So the fellows, thank you. The case, sort of the case study from Ta-Nehisi Coates' article, Clyde Ross, I think his name was, and his father told him, "Don't say a word, they'll kill us all." Now, what the hell? This was when they were stealing his horse, or they were stealing their land, or you know, something outrageous was happening, and Clyde wanted to speak up, and his father said, "Don't." Why did his father tell him not to defend his family, his right to property, sacred right to property? You know, so I think the simple failure of the federal government to defend the civil rights of the formerly enslaved people and their descendants is enough. You know, that point blank right there. So, sorry, I'm gonna stop now.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for those reflections. So yeah, I've found Dr. Malveau's contributions to the discussion very powerful. And, you know, Tulsa wasn't the only Black community that was destroyed, and our federal government failed to defend the victims of that racialized terrorism that was perpetrated on those communities. And she has a book out, Lynching. It's a book called Lynching and Spectacle, that, you know, talks about this racialized trauma and the intergenerational trauma that it's passed down from that. And, you know, that's an old tactic. You see that those, you know, beheadings that took place in antiquity, and then, you know, the head would be hung in the middle of the town square, and that would, you know, send a message to anyone that agreed with that particular line of thought, that, you know, look, this is what could happen to you, or this is what could happen to your family. So, you know, that's an old tactic, and we used it to great advantage here in this country. And I'm just going down and these wonderful notes. Thank you, Sarah, for putting these together. I'm looking for so there was Arkansas and Wilmington, where these atrocities took place. There was Rosewood in Florida, where a similar atrocity took place. And there was Valdosta, Georgia, and we could go on and on. And there was like 13 people were lynched in 2 weeks in this town in Georgia. And there was a pregnant woman. She was 19 years old, and she was near term. And when she tried to intervene, she fell victim to the lynch mob as well. And you know, and this was held as entertainment. And these images, this racialized terror, is a part of the collective consciousness of all of us in this country. It is a part of who we are. This idea that we can blow violence through the bodies of people, and it comes comes to us from many different directions, not the least of which coming from the Europeans who came to the New World, escaping their own terror and trauma, where violence was being blown through their bodies. And this is what they knew. And when they found that there were some bodies here that they could blow the violence through, yeah, it continued. It continued and continued unfettered. And we still see it being passed down in all ways, on both sides, on all sides to this day. So, you know, how do we transcend that? How do we get beyond that, that it's okay to lynch a 19-year-old woman who's pregnant? How do we reconcile that? Or again, it always goes back to my question, or is this fundamentally unsolvable? This is not new. Racialized terror is not new in almost any culture. Taretha.
Yes. The word picnic, when you said they made family gatherings with lynching, that's where the word picnic comes from. It's a variation of pick a nigger. And that's what it meant. People would go to church, praise the Lord, get their little packages together, bring the kids, and lynch someone. We have, in my area where I'm from, Jackson, Mississippi, there's several towns where my people are: Silver Creek and Prentice, Mount Carmel, Mississippi, Holiday Creek, Mississippi, that are no longer there. They're little markers on the main highways now. We have things that were documented. We have many things that were not documented. So this is something that is going to take a long time, because the ownership of resolving it falls on the backs of white people, not Black people. Because the white people, and I'm going to speak very clearly here because this is how we make movement and understanding. The white people are the ones that carry the burden of the racism, the implicit bias, because of the perspective. My people carry it as a burden of victimization and the generational stress of racism. Has caused disparities such as earlier, shorter lifespans, higher maternal and infant mortality, the income disparities that we talked about. The body actually does what we call weathering. It wears out. So sometimes if you're looking at an autopsy, you have a 50-year-old woman or 50-year-old man, the insides may look like somebody 70, 80. The body wears out, life expectancy is shorter. So those are the things that we have to really begin to address, but it has to be spoken. It has to be talked about. You have to come out of your comfort zones. And it's going to, I don't know that we'll see it in our lifetime, because in the short 50 years, we're still fighting over voters' rights. So we need to really understand, we got to jump on this.
We do. So Terry, I see your hand back up.
I do. And normally I'm an optimist, so I'm sorry for my pessimism, but I do wonder if this is a fundamentally unsolvable problem sometimes. And I feel like, you know, if you look to Germany, the only reason that they accepted their national shame was after the World Court condemned them. What we have is America being run by people who are being asked to self-reflect and self-monitor, and we have zero evidence that our leaders are capable of that. So my question is, and I don't mean to sound like I'm not loyal to what my ancestors in this country have tried to build, the good they've tried to do, but can we appeal to the World Court and say, America has had a number of years to come up with its own recommendations for reparations and has failed to do so. In that absence, it still has to be done.
I like that. I like that. And yet, yet and still, there's the conundrum. Yes, America, we're always talking about other nations and bringing them, up on charges of, crimes against humanity, where we have perpetrated one of the biggest longstanding crimes against humanity that ever was. So there's quite a bit of irony, right? In that. I mean, huge perpetrators of crimes against humanity. Eric Phillips, the gentleman that was representing CARICOM, the Multinational Commission of Caribbean Nations, was bringing up some of that example, because the type of slavery that ensued with the coming of the New World was also present throughout the diaspora. It was very much present in the Caribbean. Right. It took different shapes. It ended at a different time than what happened here in the United States. But the downstream impact of colonialization and enslavement has had its impact wherever Black bodies have been brought to what was once known as the New World. Yes, Irene.
I don't know if this would help Terry or if this is something that is even a good argument, but basically the wealth of our nation was largely built on the backs of Black people.
Right.
And I think that's a very good reason about why they are owed something. How you figure out how you really make reparations or how you really do it, I really don't know. But I think that for way, way, way too long, we have made our wealth at somebody else's expense.
Yes. So we have Denise and Irene. I don't know who is next in queue for speaking. Irene Passmore. Thank you, Irene Gibson.
I guess one of the things I got out of the round table, one of the important things was not to think of reparations in terms of doling out money, but to think of it in terms of investing in people who have been neglected and totally, well, terrorized, certainly in their lives here, but never compensated in any way, so that it's about reparations for education, for housing, for healthcare, for mental health facilities. A lot of people, when they think of reparations, they think, well, everybody who is a person of color is going to get $500,000 or something like this. And it's not about doling out money, although some of it may come to benefits of finance. But think about all the things, to Irene's point, not just that African slaves built this country and were never compensated. Their owners were compensated, but they weren't. But over the years, how they have never had the kind of opportunities for education, for having healthcare, for having the kind of safe community to live in. And so maybe putting it in those terms, again, it goes back to education, that, as they said in the town hall, that we have got to help people understand the stories behind it, the indignities, and some of the processes and ways that it can be atoned for. And it's not about money handouts. It's about investing in the people who are still an integral part of our country.
Thank you. Thank you for those reflections, Irene. Denise.
Dr. Penn, Vanessa has her hand up too. So sorry to interrupt. I know
All
Vanessa's doing the monitoring of the hands. I figured I should mention just because, yeah. I don't mean to interrupt.
I can
Sorry.
see it against her. Yeah, so please do interrupt. I
Oh,
couldn't see that.
I'll
Thank
go
you. Thank you,
first.
Vanessa. All right.
No, yeah, sorry.
It's fine, Denise, go ahead.
I particularly like what Terry brought up because my loyalty to America does not feel very good at this point. And it's mostly because of where capitalism has taken us. And that's the same reason why most people say that America is so great. So if we could, and I also don't have great faith that we're going to be able to get people to believe, or majority of people to believe, that reparations should happen. So I think it would be a wonderful idea to try to get it into the hands of the world at large, which would sort of knock us down a peg and have the whole world as the deciding factor. I just like that very much. That is all.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. All right, Vanessa, go for it.
So I want to, I thought of this, and then some people have already made this point, but I do think that it comes down to education. Before we say it's not solvable, and maybe it isn't, but we have to keep trying. And if people haven't even heard the word and they don't know what it means, then it's too early to say, well, we can't get there. And as appealing as the idea of having a world court come in and say, you need to live up to your ideals, I also just love the idea of all of the grassroots stuff that was talked about in the town hall. I think that's wonderful. And I love, coming at it from, well, they didn't talk, I didn't get all the way to the end. I don't think they talked about anything international. A little bit they did. They talked about like an international movement. I don't think they talked in terms of like a court handing down a sentence to us as a country. But I love the idea of this coming in a way from the ground up, and of people talking about it in their communities. And what it made me think of is, when I think that was something at one of our earlier meetings, people said, is this a national thing? Is this a local thing? Is this a state thing? And yes, 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 yes to all of them. I always think about sort of the other side and what the sort of, red hat wearing people are up to. They don't do that. They hit the school board, they hit the local, they hit, they're at all the levels. They are constantly pushing, and they are constantly trying to stop these conversations from happening. So that sometimes when I work to register voters, some people don't think it's important. And my friend and I always say, well, if it weren't important, why would people be trying to keep that from you?
Right.
And it's the same with the education piece. If that's not important, then why are they trying so hard to suppress it? So I think we have to, and the other thing that I thought of earlier with Terry's first question is, if we can give little examples to people, sort of manageable, and they can wrap their heads around. I can't remember the name of that beach in California that, I don't know if anybody knows this story. There was a Black family that owned this, wonderful waterfront property, and it was taken away through, I think, eminent domain, and they just got it back. Is Brian?
Manhattan
Beach.
Beach. Manhattan Beach. I just read the article last night. Terry forwarded the article about the reparations movement in California, which was initiated by their Secretary of State. Interestingly enough, Manhattan Beach, though, that's why it's fresh in my mind. So since you asked.
So yeah, that's an example that it's sort of a starter example for people to maybe understand a little bit about how the concept works. Something was taken from you, you need to be made whole. And even if even if you're no longer with us, but your descendants need to be made whole. Do people realize, for example, that, Black GIs were not eligible for the GI Bill? And just if you think about how that can affect, it's not just affecting that generation, but all the subsequent things like that, that people probably don't even realize. And maybe they haven't given much thought to. I almost feel like in a way we're just at the beginning of this. I mean, a lot of people have been working really hard for a long time, but in some ways it still feels like the ball is just beginning to get rolling. And we need to make sure that people know what reparations means and give them some examples to work with.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, Irene Gibson.
Yeah, I read someplace not very long ago that where Central Park is now was originally well, I can't say wealthy, but a very, very well-to-do Black community similar to the one in Tulsa. Well, they booted them out to build Central Park. I mean, they didn't kill them, but I doubt very much that they gave them adequate reparations. I don't really know. I'm going to look into that more.
Well, we don't have to go to Central Park. We could go to Long Branch and look at Pier 1, same thing. That was, a Black neighborhood, Pier 1 Village, and where Pier 1 Village is now. And so all these Black families were living in this waterfront property. And, they were bought out by developers, and they certainly weren't given the value of that property. Yes, and that part of that history of Central Park has been buried and recently being brought to light. So, and that has occurred again and again and again.
Yes, the name of that village, the Central Park, was the Seneca Village.
Oh,
yes, thank you.
Yes, and it was not a nice, easy little eminent domain. There were fights and battles and deaths and ugliness. And many of the lands that we're all on in New Jersey now, Lenape lands, they were stolen, taken, bodies everywhere, just a hot mess. So it hasn't been a pretty scene.
Well,
yes,
yeah,
often the legacy of violence is, kind of just glossed over. We don't, that's like, oh yeah, that happened. But that's part of the problem, that, United States is always calling out other countries about their crimes against humanity, yet we have been the author and co-signer of our own acts of violence and crimes against humanity again and again and again.
Correct.
Hello, good evening, Lorraine. And I'm realizing now the hour is upon us.
Yes,
and
the troublemaker is here now.
This wonderful conversation that we've been having this evening, and I do, like to, always be timely and wrap our discussions up, knowing that we're not necessarily going to solve anything, and we are bringing it to the table and giving voice to things that often aren't given voice to. And so I really do appreciate the opportunity that Terry gave us this evening. Something, what do I say next time? And how do I say it? What did I do well? What didn't I do? And I would invite that kind of conversation for us to have every month, because I'm sure there's going to be an example. So Molly.
So I was thinking we need to come back next time with our elevator speech. What we call our elevator speech, to explain what reparations is to somebody who's not aware.
Oh, I love that as an assignment. That's great. That's great. Taretha's putting something in, something also in the chat as well.
So I like, Carol, how you for Terry's hairdresser to put it in, women's, equal pay for women is, is a similar thing, but also just the simple fact that, yes, the country was built, or the wealth of the South that the South had was built on the backs of Black labor, free Black labor.
Actually, it's the whole country. And I remember learning that in
Country,
college.
yeah.
I never knew that. And this is, again, comes back to education and people trying to suppress this information. Because my eyes were really opened when I learned that in college, that this country literally would not be where it is today, the whole country, without the, the backbreaking labor that was, not paid for.
Right.
And in the education piece, please explain to everyone. Everybody talking about down south, no, up north. Every location, every part of the United States below the Canadian border was Confederate crazy land, just done in a different kind of way. There may have been some laws that were different, but it was all one and the same. A Black man or woman up north had the same issues that someone in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Texas would have had. And we also have to understand too, many of my cousins and other folks who are on our native reservations in 2022 don't have running water in the United States of America.
Correct.
So when we talk about a world global involvement, no, we have to correct what's going on, because internationally, slavery is still existing, including in America. We use it, we have different ways of doing it now. We got the prison complex. When folks talk about the illegals, to me, that makes me want to pull my hair out and scream and just beat people up, because that interprets to slavery, abusive type of stuff. It's very denigrating. That's like calling me a nigger, or calling my native cousins and I or myself a squaw. And just so you know, using the term squaw in relation to a Native American woman is just like calling someone a nigger. So those are the little tidbits people don't even realize. We got a long way to go, because we're still fighting for voting rights in 2022, the same way they were in 1965. So yeah, that's another little tidbit. And I put a little article in there for Terry and others when you want to talk to people about stuff, because when you start talking about this, you're going to be opening up some cans of worms, and it's going to be a lot of agitation. And there are people that have their little racist ways and ideas and thoughts that don't even know it, because they're so socialized into it, they don't even know or recognize that it's an issue. For example, saying, oh, I don't see color. Yes, you do. When you say that to me, that is an instant cue that you're already a problem. And I might have to pick up the ways of my ancestors. I had one grandmother who was born in Silver Creek, Mississippi. She might have pulled her pistol out. And the other grandmother would just say, I'll just slap the taste out your mouth. So I'm just saying, that's where we are. We haven't come as far as people want to say. We may have it on paper, but the behaviors and the ideas and thoughts and actions are still 1950. And New Jersey is more racist, biased, and segregated than my home state of Mississippi. So be clear in understanding that. Yep.
Yeah, I agree. New Jersey, I think, is one of the worst offenders. For sure. So much segregation and separation in this state. After all, it was the summer camp of the KKK, which was in Wall Township. This is where
they're still there,
KKK,
and they're still in
that's right.
Hamilton, and everything below the Raritan River is considered the Mason-Dixon line. Everything below. The madness, even parts of Wall Township, Middletown,
yeah.
Keyport, Racism is real parts of Neptune, Shark River Hills.
Yep.
And Asbury Park is more segregated now than it was
Oh
20 and
my
30
God.
years ago. Those are the
Absolutely.
realities that people have to bring out and discuss and shake up everyone's comfort zone, because that's the only way you address the issue.
Yes. So we have Molly and then Sarah and Irene.
Actually, not me. I forgot to put my hand down.
I think Lorraine also would like to speak too.
Me.
Yes, we have several people. Yes. So Lorraine.
Oh, me? Okay. Hello.
Yes.
Quick, Sankofa, you have to look backwards as you're going forward. Little piece about New Jersey, for all who don't know. Couple of things. New Jersey is the state that was going to secede with the South. They made the decision not to pull out. Well, they were going to, because cotton was coming from the South, and it was being shipped to Newark, and then textiles were made. So New Jersey was very, very involved in that whole process. And of course, that was money. And remember that New Jersey was the last state to let go of slaves. So please don't be surprised that New Jersey is all bass backwards. It's been that way for a long time. There's no little history. And Pier Village, so sad, because it wasn't just the developer. That was eminent domain. And that's a whole nother conversation. I won't go there right now. But that's it. That's all I wanted to say. Next.
Yes, I believe it was Irene Passmore. So just
Okay.
let's go quickly. Do want to, people do
Yeah,
have to say
I'll make
goodnight.
a quick point that we do have perhaps a role model of Canada who has agreed to pay reparations to their Indigenous people. I don't think they've come to terms with how to do that. It's still working its way through their parliament, but they have been called and found all of the graves of Indigenous children from the schools that they had, and they've owned up to it and said they're going to pay reparations. So it will be interesting to follow and see what they do, and they may put us to shame when we see that they are able to accomplish something that we should have done ourselves long ago. We'll watch
Yes,
them.
thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Irene Passmore. Sarah. You're on mute, my dear.
Sorry. Yep, thank you. Sorry. I was just going to say there is quite a bit of legwork that's already been done in this state regarding the passage of an act, passage of legislation around a commission, analogous, if I understand correctly, to the federal legislation. And so I guess sort of our work is cut out for us in terms of blooming where we're planted, and one thing that came out of this town hall was the importance of connecting with religious organizations, and a lot of folks here are already affiliated with one, but that doesn't mean we can't reach out to others or ask the leaders of our faith organizations to reach out to others. And I was about to put the link in the chat for the, if I'm not mistaken, with the organization that's sort of heading up that there is a movement underway. I'm not sure exactly where it's at right now. I'm not in the middle of it, but there are folks who have signed on to the in support of legislation which would mandate a commission in this state. And that seems like a good sort of, next step is, California has such a commission, and I'm not aware of any other state that does. So it would be a big deal for New Jersey to agree at least to study this. And yeah, I'd be curious if anybody, I mean, most of us here, well, anyway, what are people's thoughts about, you know, asking members of the clergy to, that we know, or even just, you can do things cold, you know, you can, you know, even though some religion has been used as a tool of oppression to justify oppression, today most congregations at least want to appear as if they are on the side of humanity, and so it would be okay to knock on the door, show up after the service, before this, you know, and does anybody know about this? And you know, it's a little step, but it's safe, I think, and I should take my own. I'll take myself up on my own challenge, and I live in West Long Branch, which I think I've heard is another area that has a history of organized racism, and well, but so I know of at least one church in town that you know. So I pledge to do that before March, our next gathering, and I invite others to meet my pledge. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And there are lots of things that are going on. Many resources have been shared in the chat. So I invite people to take a look there. And we are planning on reconvening. Right now, the date is March 13th. So a lot to think about between now and then. There's lots of things to do, you know, lots of homework, including, as Molly says, getting our elevator pitch together. What are you going to say? Then when it comes up, I've never heard of reparations. What are reparations? What's going to be your answer to that question? So I want to thank Vanessa and Sarah and all of the committee who continuously works behind the scenes to bring the conversations forward, to share the resources, to keep us thinking. Thank you to my co-facilitator, Minister Kerwin Webb, who wasn't able to join us this evening. And thank you to all of you for showing up, for sitting in your seats, for being thoughtful, for having the courage to even allow yourself to entertain such a conversation as this. So we're going to sign off for now. And again, thank you so very much.
Good night. Thank you all.
Good night.
Thank you. Nice to see everyone. Take care. Good night.
Good night.
And the links are will be mailed out that were in the chat.
Great, thank
Good
you,
to
Sarah.
see everybody. Glad I could make it.
Yeah. Glad to see you.
Glad you could make it as well. Good night.
All right. Take care.
Good night.
Bye. All.
All right. Thank you. I guess we're good. I'll stop recording.